So this is going to be the final attack update of the conference. Please welcome ATT&CK's cloud lead, Knerr.
Hello, everyone. Let's talk a bit about the cloud. So my name is Knerr. I'm a cybersecurity engineer here at MITRE, and I'm the Attack for Cloud lead. I have experience in the past as a penetration tester, mostly focused on websites, and I've also worked a lot as a web developer. So the web and cloud space is really interesting to me. I think there's a lot of exciting things to explore, and I just think it's neat. When I'm not at my computer, I'm an avid kite flyer. This is a photo of me taken a few weeks ago at the Ocean City Kite Festival. So you can often find me flying kites. If we're going to talk about Attack for Cloud, I think we should start with Attack before Cloud. Because long ago, the three platforms, macOS, Windows, and Linux, lived in harmony. But everything changed when the cloud attacked. Because you see, cloud is very different in a lot of ways from the other platforms. And that brings a lot of unique challenges. The first and most obvious way that cloud is different is simply that there's a lot of it. There is diversity within the other platforms, within macOS, within Linux, within Windows, but cloud brings it to a whole new level. There are tons of different services. If you're getting infrastructure as a service, you could be provisioning whole virtual machines. You could be using platforms to deploy databases, for deploying web applications, individual functions. You could be looking at object storage, or you could be using services for networking, logging, identity management. And that's not even to mention all the different software as a service out there. Like services for wikis and code repos and document management and email. So there's a lot of different functionality we're considering, and these are targeted in different ways by adversaries. On top of that, there's tons of new defenders to cloud spaces. Lots of organizations that are more used to kind of traditional Active Directory environments, and now suddenly they're having to deal with all sorts of new considerations, right? They have to think about new types of logs. They have to think of new ways to manage identities. And there's a whole bunch of security concerns that come with that, and they need a place to look. On top of that, there's also some sparse public threat reporting. It's not as developed as other platforms like Windows. And that can create some problems when we want to add something new, but there's just not evidence of it being exploited in the wild. It is getting better. In the past year or so, there's been a lot of great threat reports that have come out that have discussed things that adversaries are doing when targeting cloud systems, but there's still a lot of gaps. One of the unique things about cloud spaces is permissions, just how many permissions there are, and the fact that these can be really fine-grained. And that creates a lot of benefits for security. You can get really granular with how you define access. You can take advantage of just-in-time access and other kind of temporary permissions in order to really lock down your environments. But that also takes a lot of time and resources. And that's a real pain when you're trying to get things deployed, trying to get them out there, right? It's much easier to just give everyone as many permissions as possible, but that also can create problems down the line. Cloud also has a lot of overlap with other platforms, which can create some fuzzy lines, right? You can have Linux virtual machines deployed in the cloud. You can have identities that are shared between cloud and on-prem environments. So there's lots of spaces in which an adversary can move between platforms really seamlessly. So in previous releases, what we've been trying to do is add more techniques, more context, right? Just read the threat reporting, see what's happening, and try to catch up with it. So we've added techniques like Cloud API. There was a wonderful talk yesterday about undetectable execution techniques. I think this probably fits, so apologies to the detection engineers, but hopefully that is useful for the CTI analysts among us, because it is a medium by which adversaries are targeting the cloud. There's also the cloud services sub-technique of remote services. So thinking about those kind of connections between cloud and on-prem, those shared identities that adversaries are using to try to cop between one and the other. And cloud administration command, thinking of running one-off scripts and commands on hybrid joined or virtual machines hosted in the cloud. And all through it, we're trying to reinforce that line between cloud and the other platforms. So thinking about cloud as things where you are, touching the cloud console, using the cloud API or CLI or SDK, right? But if you're on a cloud-hosted VM, then maybe you're just engaging in local file discovery. Maybe that fits more in the Linux platform. So you have to kind of consider both. And even as a defender, be willing to operate in that space between platforms. Spoilers for the upcoming release. One of the things that we've been really thinking about is that permissions thing that I mentioned earlier. And one of the things about permissions in the cloud is that they can often be a sort of ladder to other permissions. If you, for instance, have permission to create access tokens for higher privileged users, then you can use that to escalate your own privileges. Maybe things have been misconfigured so you can take on temporary roles that maybe you shouldn't have access to, or you can pass roles onto EC2 instances and use those in order to kind of get the instance to do something for you that you don't have permissions to do directly. So all of these permissions interact with each other in really interesting ways, and adversaries are using those not just for persistence, as account manipulation has kind of traditionally been under, but also for privilege escalation. So we're trying to think of ways to call that out and add more privilege escalation context about these sorts of behaviors and these sorts of techniques. We've also covered some things that we've seen adversaries doing in threat reports. So there's been some reports about direct connections to cloud-hosted virtual machines, some good reporting, for instance, about use of Azure Serial Console, as well as adversaries gaining privileged accounts and then using that to dump secrets from key vaults and secret management stores, right? So those aren't unsecured credentials. They're supposed to be there, but adversaries are targeting them, so definitely worth having detections there. We've also added the first infrastructure as a service software with collaboration from the CTI team, so we're very excited about that, but I won't spoil what it is. You'll just have to wait to find out. So going forward, though, we still have a lot of challenges that we want to address. And in particular, we want to know how we can make Attack for Cloud as approachable as possible for these new cloud defenders, these individuals whose organizations are migrating infrastructure to the cloud, or maybe got Office 365 or Google Workspace, maybe subscribe to a SaaS service, right? Individuals who don't have as much experience in the space, but are trying to find those techniques that matter to them. And in particular, we want to try to do a good job of balancing between abstraction and specificity across vendors. So, for example, if if a defender is coming to the attack site and they have Azure AD, or now Entra ID, right? And they want to know where to look to get started. Well, that platform is on the attack site, right? They can click on it. They have a list of techniques. They're like, great, we have somewhere to look. But let's say they have Okta, right? That's not a named platform. It falls under the software as a service platform. Maybe that's not super clear about where to look, or maybe if they go there, they find that things are too abstract. They don't know how to translate it to what they specifically need. But at the same time, we can't have a platform for every single software as a service vendor there is. So a lot of it is finding that balance and trying to address how do we call out those functionality we care about, how do we call out the types of software as a service and infrastructure as a service we care about, while also kind of retaining that specificity that new defenders can go, okay, I've got to start. I know where to look. And identity and access management is something that I really want to look at then in the future. So considering maybe how to call that out specially, maybe splitting it from the SaaS platform, or just considering of ways to make it clear that you have these identity as a service providers, or you have cloud software that performs these functions. These are the techniques that you want to look at. Here's some things that you might care about. And so we want to make those identity and authentication threats to software as a service clearer, especially when we consider how broad the SaaS platform is. And in a related vein, I really would love to call out continuous integration and continuous development, CI/CD, a little bit clearer as well. These are systems that are being targeted by adversaries, both for supply chain attacks, trying to get at downstream customers, but also because these services are often privileged, they often have access to valuable credentials. So we want that to be clear as well, that, hey, here's some techniques you can look at, here's some specificity that maybe isn't quite as captured in the software as a service bucket. So we want to make sure that we're looking at kind of all these components and adequately kind of calling them out. So why all this? I guess organizations are adopting cloud-based solutions. They're, again, migrating infrastructure to the cloud. They're migrating kind of email and document management to cloud services. They're subscribing to things like Salesforce, right? So there's been a lot of movement in that direction, and threat actors are following them. Some are targeting cloud environments specifically, and some are targeting those connections between cloud environments and on-prem environments. And on top of all that, cloud environments are complicated to defend. And all of those permissions, those new logs, some logs costing money or being locked behind licenses, there's a lot to consider there. And we want people to have a space to go and get started and find techniques that they can start to mitigate and detect. So we want you to send us feedback, to propose additions, and tell us how you use Attack for Cloud, what you find intuitive, what you don't find intuitive. We want to hear it as we kind of develop the platform further and consider all of these things that I've been talking about. So thank you.
So I know Tariq mentioned valid accounts yesterday. You mentioned Cloud API. Getting back to what Patrick said earlier about IK techniques, the other big one is account manipulation. Definitely a fun conversation that we're hoping and really excited more people will kind of venture into. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but as Casey said, we're always open for feedback. Feel free to reach out to the Alias, find Casey or myself directly, or if you're interested and already in the Slack channel, we do have a cloud channel where you can send continuous feedback, post after the release, some of these new techniques and that new spicy IaaS software entry. Definitely open ears to any ideas there. But small token of our appreciation. Excellent job. Thank you.